All right, let's get right into it. There's a new development unfolding in the Mediterranean. An international flotilla called Sumud is making its way towards Gaza. Now, their stated goal is to challenge the long-standing naval blockade there. So, we're going to break down what this mission is all about, the history behind it, and frankly, what's at stake for everyone involved. Here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the mission itself. What is Sumud? Then, we'll take a step back and get into the history of the blockade and the really thorny legal dispute at its center. After that, we'll dig into the logistics of the flotilla and wrap up by looking at the tense, unresolved conflict it's sailing right into. So, what is actually happening on the water as we speak? Well, an international convoy has set sail from Barcelona, Spain. On paper, its purpose is to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. But really, the much bigger objective here is to directly challenge a naval blockade that has sealed off the area for years. Now, the name they've chosen, Sumud, is really significant. It's an Arabic word that translates to resilience or steadfastness. So right off the bat, that choice of name frames the whole mission, at least in the eyes of its organizers, as this act of endurance, of an unwavering stand with the people in Gaza. And this is no small gesture. We're talking about a pretty significant operation. The convoy kicked off with about 40 boats leaving from Spain, but it's expected to grow. The plan is for another 20 boats to join from France, plus 4 more from Italy, potentially creating a fleet of more than 64 vessels. But this flotilla isn't happening in a vacuum, not at all. To really get why this is such a big deal, you have to understand the history of the very blockade that it's trying to break. This timeline really lays it out. The naval blockade of Gaza was first imposed by Israel way back in 2007. And since then, there have been multiple attempts by different flotillas to challenge it. The most recent big attempt was in late 2025, and that one ended with the boats being intercepted. That event, right there, really sets the stage for the Sumud mission that we're watching unfold right now. And that 2025 attempt is a really crucial precedent. It involved about 50 boats, and it wasn't just anyone on board. It included high-profile political figures and well-known international activists. Ultimately, the Israeli Navy boarded and stopped the convoy while it was still in international waters. That outcome directly informs the high stakes of today's mission. So this history of confrontation leads us straight to the core of the issue, the legal dispute. The whole standoff really hinges on two completely different, you could say polar opposite, interpretations of international law, and it's created a total deadlock. Okay, so here are the two sides of the argument. On one hand, you have the flotilla supporters and groups like Amnesty International who argue that intercepting ships in international waters is flat out illegal. They see their mission purely as humanitarian relief. On the other side, the Israeli government points to Article 51 of the UN Charter, the right to self-defense. They argue the blockade is a critical security measure to stop weapons and what are called dual-use materials from getting into Gaza. That's stuff that could be used for either civilian or military purposes. So, with that legal minefield as the backdrop, let's get into the nuts and bolts. How is this mission actually being run? What are the operational details? Well, the mission has a pretty distinct profile. The participants are activists from literally dozens of different countries. The vessels themselves are mostly sailboats, which you can imagine creates some unique logistical challenges for a long-distance convoy like this. And here's a critical point. They've planned a week-long stop in Sicily specifically for nonviolence training. That signals a very clear strategy for how they intend to handle any potential confrontation. Finally, and this is so important, it's just impossible to look at this flotilla in isolation. It is sailing directly into an incredibly charged and unresolved conflict. The atmosphere in the region is just unbelievably tense. Think about what this mission is sailing into. There's a ceasefire agreement from October 2025 that's still officially in effect, but both sides have been constantly accusing each other of violating it. That adds a really dangerous layer of volatility to this whole journey. And this quote really sums up just how fragile everything is. That ceasefire came after 2 full years of intense fighting, and the reality on the ground is that it's constantly being tested. So what that means is the Sumud flotilla isn't just a humanitarian mission, it's a major political act, entering a zone where the peace, such as it is, could break down at any given moment. So that leaves us with this massive question. What you have here is a direct standoff between humanitarian claims on one side and national security imperatives on the other. As the Sumud flotilla continues its journey, its outcome, whatever that ends up being, is absolutely going to have major implications for the future of this long and incredibly contentious blockade.